Okay, so right now we're going to leave this up to make sure that everybody can get it, because once you see it, it's 800 pages. Everything links together. It's mind-boggling. It is absolutely incredible. So what we want to do is something different on the schedule. We have a break, and by all means, if you do need a break, I encourage you to take it. But due to kind of like technical issues, we had to skip a lot of the question time. I would like to invite all the speakers who have presented thus far. Please come up to the front, and that includes Jessie. And we're going to have a bit of Q&A time. And in fact, I think if you can bring up microphone number 2, I'll send a mic around the audience if you want to ask questions. And so, again, speakers, please come up here. You can ask it of anybody. Please ask who you're at, or say who you're asking, okay?
I'll give you a minute to get settled, but this will be for Jess.
Jess, I think the question is actually for you.
Oh, what? Sorry.
I'm just, are you settled?
There we go.
It's for you. So I'm John Scott. I actually teach at UMD. For those of us who teach courses on conlangs, which I have done, is this something you're looking to develop into learning an LMS format such as Canvas or D2L? Because if not, I'd be happy to collaborate on that. So we could plug it into courses around North America.
If you have that kind of energy, I do want to warn you that by the end of it, my bookmark link list was so long that like my computer kept trying to shut down.
Right.
And so like, I feel like having some sort of web-based friendly system would definitely be a way to go and could send people to the exact pieces they need. And in some cases would be even more manageable, because what you'll see in the document, I have to say, oh, you're here now, but if you want to go back to that previous decision, like you can't hit a back button. You got to like build in a back link. And so some of that was difficult. And so, I'd be like super stoked to support somebody else doing that work.
Right. Well, there is some self-interest there because I have taught a course like this. And I think this should be a great like first 5 weeks exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Beginning course in conlangs. That's what I've done. It's like we try it out by the end of the semester.
And that would make me so happy. Like that's the whole reason I'm putting it out there.
Yeah. It's about, the rights and the sharing. I would love to collaborate on that for the sake of conlang courses in the future.
Perfect. And on that link tree, my email address, get in touch with me. Okay. Let's do it. But again, I will support you as you do it.
Raise your hands high for Alex so she can see.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay. First is for Jessie.
Yeah.
So bank were, I think, 23 features. 33 were shared between Tamil and English. Could you like realistically or semi-realistically have a language in which every feature was different from English?
That's a really good question. And that's, oh my God, jinx, David. We said that at exactly the same time. It's got to be possible. I don't know what language it is. But it's got to be possible because of the way that the questions are worded. It's really about those really basic features like articles and structures. And you've got to imagine there's, languages where it just operates on such a different scale that none of them would end up getting coded the same as English. So but that would be like really cool because that would be, the other end of the spectrum. There could, of course, be something coded for all 195 same as English and still be a very different language. And so like, that's the cool thing though, is like all the building blocks could be the same and you could end up with something very different on the surface.
Right. Thank you for your answer. This is to me an interesting idea for conlang. My second question is for John Quijada. And it's just, what is the etymology of the word isquil?
In the original 2004 version of the language, the word meant hypothetical representation of a language based on the root, F plus K. So th was the root for linguistic expression, verbally or written. And then the rest of the morphology put it into what was called the representative format, and not format, a category called essence, which basically meant a hypothetical representation of whatever the stem is. So it meant a hypothetical representation of the language. And I called it that because I never expected anyone to ever want to learn it or use it in the real world. So that's why it was hypothetical. And then I just kept that name out of a sense of continuity.
We're also monitoring YouTube. I'm just going to mention there's a question for Paul. I don't know if Paul is still on Zoom anywhere, but there is a question for Carl from Veronica Hamilton. What features of a language make it appropriate for a particular type of orthography?
As I mentioned during my presentation, the phonotactics, the phonological structure of the language are what typically influence the writing system that develops. Some writing systems, or excuse me, some languages diverge. Vietnamese is a good example. It no longer uses Chinese characters. It uses the Latin alphabet. But typically the phonology and the phonotactics are what drive the primary direction.
Hi, so this is a question for Sally. So I was curious, you mentioned during your presentation that when you were, when you wrote your book in 2006 about Hildegard and lingua ignota, that you're feeling differently about it now. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about what you mean. Like, so you think that she was trying to do something different? So if you could tell us more, that would be great.
Thank you. It's a subtle change in opinion. As I said, I watched this really young, prettier, younger version of myself going on and on about how much Hildegard was our first conlanger. Essentially, and in my book, I stressed how much she reflected or what we recognize in our own conlanging. I mean, she went to the Summaria, which were basically encyclopedias or dictionaries for priests who were a little insecure about their Latin, so that they could go and look the Latin word up and see the vernacular. They were the Summarium Heinrici was the one that they were all based on, and there was one near Trier. And so I talked about how that was like how we look at say textbooks on different languages. And I talked about her making up a script, and I talked about her making a kind of a dictionary and that sort of thing. I was drawing her into the contemporary world. And recently, the more I started teaching this class and the more I started thinking about Hildegard, I began to realize that her philosophy for making this is very different, basically, from conlang. And in a recent article that I have been writing, and it's in progress now, I emphasize how much more it is part of a kind of an adulation for the list. Okay, there's even a term for it in German, Listen, Wissenschaft, okay, Listenwissenschaft, that there is the science of the list that was very much part and parcel of the names for God, for instance, that the Middle Ages, far from being this barbaric age, was incredibly systematized. And Hildegard herself, when you look at her, because she was so accused, when she was rediscovered by the 19th and early 20th century people, of doing something that was glossolalia and dreamlike and oniric, and I despised a particular article which wanted to say that she was developing some kind of dreamlike language. I wanted to stress that she's very much part and parcel of this making of lists. She's disciplined. She's a polymath. But when she speaks about her visions, she says, I am not at all like those ecstatics who lose consciousness. And her first book, Shivyas, was a list of her visions. So she'd have the illumination, and then she would list what she saw, and then she would identify what each of these items meant. And maybe this is a little bit like our adulation of system and that sort of thing, but we would never say that it was divine. We would, and so one thing that in reading her, if you read her Liber Divinarum Operum, okay, her book on the divine works of God, and also the text is attributed to her, Causae et Curae, Causes and Cures, both there, in both texts, she talks about, and it's not an original idea, but she talks about how the living humor, the viriditas, turns or makes mankind into a kind of microcosm of the macrocosm. All right. In other words, from top to bottom, humanity reflects the natural creation of God, and she talks, and so her list, I wondered what it was. I mean, because when you sing it, O Orskis Ecclesia, O Orskis Ecclesia, you know, her 5 words in it make sense because they're sung and they're in context. And then you look at the list, there's no context for it except this taxonomy. And so I was thinking that each word in a way is kind of like a name for God. In that if every part of us reflects God's creation, down from the top to the bottom, and even the things that that we do that are not so holy, like whisper and chatter, the chatterer, the whisperer, the basin, the grape steak, and that sort of thing. It's part of the world that needs healing, because one of the things that she is best known for, and this is becoming very apropos, what with the development of eco-critical theory, is an emphasis on Hildegard's healing and her herbs and her lists of things in the physica and their different properties. Again, the systematization and that sort of thing. So I'm seeing the lingua ignota more in that context than in the conlang context. So I'm returning her to the Middle Ages.
Okay.
Thank you for that question.
Hi. So I'm relatively new, so my question was going to be to kind of anyone. But I kind of feel like I don't really know what I don't know, so it's wanting to know if you guys on your journeys have had strategies or resources to make sure you're not either making a wrong turn or missing something. So I feel like I have to learn everything that there is before making decisions. And short of asking all my friends to just start using my languages and, figure out the mistakes that way, which I can't do because they're not going to do it. So, yeah.
Make mistakes. Mess up. Start over. So when I was about 9 years old, I found a dictionary that was for Chinese Mandarin, and I fell in love with the Hanzi, the writing system, but I had no freaking clue how to pronounce the words. And when I looked in the back, it had some phrases to use, some common phrases, and very, very abstract, grammatical explanations. I had no idea what it meant, but I practiced writing the symbols, and I kept practicing writing the symbols. And I was probably well into my 20s before I actually understood that Chinese didn't work like English. So I kept making mistakes, and I kept going back, and I kept learning more. Making mistakes is the quickest way to learn. don't be afraid to revise. Don't be afraid to go back and start over from scratch. I probably have thrown away more languages than I've kept. So that's my answer to you.
Yep. By the way, also think about how many iterations John's language went through.
I just want to, it was that extra step forward that counts. But to just build off what Carl just said, one of my childhood friends said a phrase once that I will never forget, and I put up on my office wall at one point: blunder boldly, do it. And so, yeah, just do it, have some fun, and learn from it.
On a more practical, specific level. But aside from everything they just said, the other trick is to just apply your language to all kinds of different situations and texts. Translate anything you can think of. Song lyrics, proverbs, recipes, directions of how to get to the store, anything, and see how it works.
This might have been said already, but the also thing is just get yourself involved in a community. I mean, writers join writers groups and artists they take painting classes. And so get on Facebook or many of these different groups that are out there and just throw it out and see what people say.
There is, of course, our conlangs on Reddit, but also what's kind of proliferating now is there are a number of different conlang discords, which can be really cool for getting feedback. A lot of them have a lot of kind of different feels. So it might take a minute to find one that's right for you. But like I found one that I just absolutely love. And I know that a number of people here are on it. So.
Oh, just one other thing I'd like to add is that in my own case, I did something that, as far as I can tell, is a bit uncommon with conlangers. I actually got into studying and exploring other people's conlangs. While many conlangers appreciate other people's conlangs and laud them and encourage them, I've never seen a lot of people really getting into the weeds and studying their grammars and picking them apart and being wowed by them. And I love doing that. For a while I was writing a column for the Language Creation Society, in which I was doing exactly that, showcasing other people's conlangs. And I didn't do this out of any desire to like steal somebody's ideas, but purely as A, inspiration, and B, really enjoying it when I discovered how someone had solved a problem that I had. There was a guy who was very famous in the 90s and aughts in the conlanging community at that time named Rick Morneau, who wrote an incredible treatise whose name is, what was it? The Interlingua, Translation Interlingua. Yeah, and I discovered it very late, like in the early aughts when IthQuil, the first version of IthQuil, was almost finished. And when I discovered it, I just was very exasperated because he so elegantly gave solutions to problems that I had struggled with for years. And I said, why didn't I find this earlier? He would have pointed me in directions that would have just saved me months and years of work, and it would have been great inspirations to me. So picking apart other people's conlangs can be both very inspiring, can get the ideas in your own head going, can be jumping off points, like standing on the shoulders of giants to take your own leaps. And, conlangers share ideas among each other and are inspirations for each other that way. And I don't think enough of that occurs.
Very good answer. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is a question for Sally, a longtime fan of Tana, by the way. But I was interested by what you had to say about your course on magical language in the Middle Ages. And I wanted to ask if there is anywhere that information about the syllabus or the resources that you drew on for the course available.
Yeah, they're online, but they're in Blackboard, but I can give you a copy if you're interested. I mean, anybody can write me or email me and I'll send it to you. I have never, ever liked any syllabus I ever wrote. In fact, somebody asked me, you know, they were going to do basically a book on people's syllabi. And would I contribute my syllabus? And it was something really specific, like teaching Celtic languages in a class not devoted to Celtic. And I thought, what the point? What's the point of that? And so and she said, I said, can I make you an ideal syllabus? And she said, no, it has to be real syllabus. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm out. Yeah, so definitely I can give you a syllabus. I mean, but which one do you want? Do you want the one I taught in 2021, 2023, 2019, 2016? The very first one, which it's developed, and attending this conference has given me grand new ideas for teaching it again. So if you want it, sure, I'll give you my email.
We got a question online for Sylvia. Sylvia, what is the most surprising thing that you've learned about language while working on Kalen over the years? Just dropping that in your lap.
I don't know. Language is weird. It shouldn't.
No.
No. No. Probably verbing weirds language. Okay.
Okay. This is also a quick question. A quick question from online. There was a question that was asked about in the Avatar: The Way of Water, the Tulkun. They said, do they actually have a language, or was it just whale noise? So I texted Paul. Paul said the Tolkien have a language with which they can communicate very specific thoughts, but I don't know anything about its structure. So I asked the follow-up, did anyone actually create anything for it, or is it just something that exists as part of the fiction of the film? And his response was, I don't know the answer to that. I can only tell you that I wasn't involved. So, I mean, if I can guess, having worked on films and stuff, it was probably the sound guys. Okay.
This is for, oh God, this is for Carl, I think, but everyone is welcome to contribute. So you said something that I think historically is really interesting, which is thinking about the way that human hands motions will change. But what about a society, and I don't think it's that far from now, in which we don't write by hand ever again? And how would that change the way that you would find something that, like, how would it then, how would that impact, I guess, the evolution, the shapes that we're working with, to come up with something that is so consistent, but that isn't necessarily evolving based on becoming lazy to create shapes faster, but is rather a more computer-based shape? Does that make sense?
So what are you touching your keyboard with?
Well, I'm touching it. It's coming out the same way, whatever I hit it with, right? So that would be my nose if I want to. I've done that actually.
I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. I think what you're asking is a much longer historical arc kind of question, right? What is the future of writing going to look like? That's a very difficult question to answer, but I think that if it remains in a digital state, it's more likely that it will remain more static, right? The letter X, right? What did the Romans use X for? It's not a trick question. It was X. Good try though. Well, what did the Greeks use that same symbol for? Chi, right? So the thing is, it's not just dependent on the symbols, it's dependent on the language, right? How does the language change? That is what's going to determine what symbols change and how those symbols change. It's not just the method of writing, it's the language that influences the writing, okay? So let's put it this way. 100 years from now, somebody decides to go back to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it and look at some of the tweets, right? and you got TBH and some weird emoji and then maybe an eggplant or whatever, right? Whatever it is that person 100 years from now going to be able to look at that and immediately know what it says? No, but are they going to be able to pull up Sally's syllabus and be able to read it? Most likely, yes, right? So it's not just that the writing has changed, it's the language, right? Will there still be records and recordings of English? Will people still be speaking a version of English that we speak now? Probably so, right? So the writing will be mostly static if it remains digital.
I don't know that really answered what I was asking for. So you spoke about when you start with something, right? And then the motion of writing that evolves. And what I'm saying is, let's imagine, like you also talked about Vietnamese no longer using a writing system it used previously. So let's imagine a society that is 500 years from now that has decided that its writing system needs an update and is no longer restricted by the motions or the tools that we've considered as part of a fundamental piece in the evolution. We had these tools in the past, so we evolved. If we're no longer constrained by that, if you were creating a writing system for a conlang that was from a society in which those restraints were no longer imposed, how would you come up with something that is consistent that you think would mesh with that society, I guess?
Well, I want to answer this question in a slightly different way. There was a gentleman who realized that language was illogical and was ill-suited to scientific pursuits. He was like, it's too irregular, it's too metaphorical, we need something better. His name was John Wilkins, and he created a language, a perfect language that would be that would eliminate all this ambiguity and irregularity. And he did it. So he did it. Now what happened? Nothing, because nobody wanted to use it.
A lot to say about that.
Wait. I still don't need this. So I think the definitions of some of the words.
It's online.
Okay. We would have to define in society, this hypothetical society, okay? Then we would have to, just from my perspective, what language are they speaking? Again, I cannot stress enough, the way a language works influences the way it is written, okay? Do you text TBH to your friends? Serious question. Plenty of other abbreviations or acronyms, correct? Right? But do you say them out loud? You say them out loud? That's very strange, but you do. And maybe I do have white hair, so that's okay, great. Here's what I'm saying to you. And unless or until we define what language they're speaking, I can't substantively answer your question.
Wow, 500 years ago. Okay, hold on a sec. Now, I mean, we're getting very close to our next talk. We're probably going to have to cut it off, but I'm glad that we were able to have some Q&A, and probably we're going to have Q&A after the next two talks. So, and then of course, we're all still going to be here. Find each other. We can get to the bottom of this, and then between now and the next 500 years. So, big hand for all of our speakers. Thank you so much. All right.